This lecture is about utilitarianism. And this week, we're going to get you guys involved in the role-playing game, character generation. By the end of this lecture, students should be able to state and apply correctly the principle of utility, as well as describe utilitarianism, to explain the different aspects to consider according to Bentham when calculating happiness, explain and assess Mill's rule utilitarian analysis of lying. You should be able to explain strengths and weaknesses or criticisms of utilitarianism, compare and contrast Bentham and Mill, comparing Mill and Bach on lying, and be able to apply Bentham's calculus. You should be able to explain and identify instances of different theories on the moral limits of law and assess utilitarian reasoning supporting the harm principle. Okay, so that's a lot to do. So let's get started. First, I'm just going to vaguely introduce you to our two main characters, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. So Jeremy Bentham was born in 1748 and died in 1832 and was a Londoner. One of the main aspects of his theory is his egalitarianism. He said each person is to count for one and no one for more than one. He was a legal, political, and prison reformer. In fact, he went to law school because basically his parents told him to or expected him to. And then he was very chagrined at how complicated the law was and how divorced it was from what is socially beneficial and what is morally good. So in this utilitarianism, he's really trying to combine all of these aspects together, what is morally good, what is socially beneficial, and what is legally reformative. He invented the panopticon and the principle of utility. If you are thinking of traveling abroad to see philosophy in action or philosophers not in action, help yourself to visiting Jeremy Bentham's corpse. This is called an auto icon. He had an idea that instead of having statues to dead people, you can use dead people as statues. And thus he's been preserved in perpetuity at the college that he helped endow. Now, this is John Stuart Mill and his wife, Harriet Taylor, also a Londoner, as I think I mentioned. He's a wunderkind, meaning he learned like Greek and Latin when he was very young and was reading economics by the age of like 11, something ridiculous. So he's very skilled in economics, logic, and political philosophy. He was also an actual political reformer and served as a member of parliament for a very brief time, in which he defended human rights, both the right to vote for women and the right of emancipation or freedom from oppression for Jamaica. He was devoted to his wife, and so in old age, he was buried next to her in their place in France. So do the following thought experiment given by Mill. This is meant, the purpose of this thought experiment is to show that only consequences matter morally. So I want you to test this on yourself and see if he's right. He who saves a fellow creature from drowning does what is morally right, whether his motive be duty or the hope of being paid for his trouble. So in this example, do you agree or do you disagree with Mill that the motive doesn't matter? Whoever saves a fellow creature from drowning does what is right, period. Whether he's doing it in hopes of a reward or whether he's doing it because he knows it's the right thing to do. That's what he means by duty. So, do you agree or disagree with Mill? Give multiple reasons in support of your conclusion or against the competing view. So for Mill and Bentham, look up the biographies or any autobiographical writing you can find and create your own stats for the role-playing game characters. Utilitarianism is a consequentialist theory. It ignores the motive or goal of an action and rules normally associated with the act itself. The only morally relevant aspect is the effects of the action. Okay? So we can't say, look, the reason somebody did this, the goal they had when they did this is to get this thing going. Okay? Instead, they're not held accountable by the intention, they're held accountable by their impact or their outcome or effect. So the principle of utility goes like this. What is right is what produces the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. The foundations for morality for utilitarianism is happiness, and happiness in a much purer, less complicated sense. Pleasure in the absence of pain is the idea. So not the idea of eudaimonia as an Aristotelian happiness. That's more like human flourishing. That's a much thicker concept. He says, look, happiness is the sole end of human action. This is Mill. And the promotion of it, the test by which to judge of all human conduct. So let me deal with the first part. Happiness is the sole end of human action. In other words, that is the goal of everybody, is to achieve happiness. Okay? When they're acting voluntarily. Ideally, they're trying to achieve happiness. And what is good is what promotes happiness for all. That's the judge of all human conduct. Humans comprehend cause and effect. So if they know they're going to cause pain, they shouldn't act that way. They should instead try to cause maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. So before they commit voluntary acts, they understand the likely effects of their behavior. You understand what will happen normally when you engage in voluntary acts. I mean, there are certain things that come out of nowhere, but normally things go a certain way. And we learn to expect those certain ways that they go. Because of that, you are responsible, moral agents, people who are responsible for what they cause, not just for what they intend, according to consequentialism. Now, their form of egalitarianism means sort of a lot of different things. So first, like the Bentham idea, each count for one and no more than one, meaning the base moral equality of each. So if I want you to think about cake, okay? So say I was delivering cake to everybody in class, okay? And I had the choice between vanilla cake and chocolate cake, okay? The best way to make everybody the happiest, if I could only choose one cake, is to get everybody to vote and to make their own choices. And then the majority vote would be the cake that I would send out, because that way everybody would count as one and no more than one. And I myself, as one of the cake participants, would only have one vote myself, even if I am the one paying for the cake. Okay, because we're each equal in our desire to eat cake. Does that make sense? Each person's interests matter as well. So I want you to recognize that other people, as well as you, imagine what is likely to happen. So they think about cause and effect ahead of time. And they also think about what's likely to benefit them or what's likely to harm them. So they think also about pain and pleasure. So this is what we are always imagining the world to be, is something that it has causal forces at play, okay? And those could be painful or pleasurable. Because of that, we develop preferences We might prefer chocolate cake to vanilla cake or vice versa. And that is just what we expect to like, or what we expect to bring us pleasure. Since we need to treat every other human as equally rational, every other human interests and preferences matter equally. Okay? Now, Bentham created this elaborate way to calculate, meaning sort of put some quantification to what brings humans pleasure and what brings us pain, okay? And to have a way to think ahead of time about morally what is the best choice for us to make. And again, morally being for the principle of utility, maximizing pleasure, minimizing pain for the maximum number of people. So he created this thing we call the hedonic calculus, hedonism meaning sort of the goal of pleasure. So first, when we're thinking about something that might cause pleasure or pain, how long will that experience last? Okay, so for the cakes, that's equal. All things considered, cake is cake. So the duration of cake pleasure or pain will be about equal. Next would be intensity. How intense is the experience? So we can imagine imagining cake versus having cake. The imagining of cake is not as intense an experience or intense a pleasure as actually experiencing it. Probability, how sure it is that what is predicted to occur will occur. So you have to think ahead of time about how likely the impact that you think is going to happen is going to happen. And next, the proximity. So how near to the sensation one is. So if you're thinking about your graduation and it's right around the corner versus very far off, the experience of thinking about that, which does, like as an intellectual pleasure, give pleasure. One is a nearer sensation, so the pleasure is more proximate. So these are all geared towards, will this produce pleasure and minimize pain? But there's also questions that think about more about the future. Will this produce good or ill in the future as well? So Bentham thinks about fecundity. Fecundity we can think about as producing or abundance. So it's chance of being followed by sensations of the same kind. So how does a pleasure lead to other pleasures? Does a pain lead to other pain? Next, he thinks about purity. So this is sort of the opposite of fecundity. It's chance of not being followed by sensations of the opposite kind. A pleasure by a pain or a pain by a pleasure. We can think of this, eating cake is pleasurable, but eating too much cake is followed by pain. So that's not a pure pleasure, eating too much cake. Finally, the number of persons who will be affected by the action. So those who will be impacted, each would deserve their own part in the calculus, considering these likely effects and different aspects to those likely effects. So I'm going to have you do this, okay? Suppose you were to host a party and there are only two possible desserts, pie or cake. Use Bentham's calculus yourself to figure out which dessert would produce the most pleasure for all potentially affected. Of course, this is for you, just an act of reflection, so you're imagining your own cake party. How would you apply or determine, cake or pie party? How would you apply or determine these 7 aspects to figure out if you're buying pie or cake? Duration, intensity, probability, proximity, fecundity, purity, and extent. So that's where I want you to just practice and really think about, give consideration to Bentham's calculi. True or false, it is moral in utilitarianism to fail to count some guests, or to count one's own vote only. True or false? It is morally required in utilitarianism to reason about what would benefit other people and what they would prefer if they are affected by one's actions. True or false? It's morally required in utilitarianism to act only from a good motive. Finally, just active reflection. Have you ever regretted doing something because you neglected to fully calculate how it would affect somebody? Okay. Now I'm going to go through sort of multiple differences between Bentham and Mill. And I'm going to start with the most important first. Bentham is what we call an act utilitarianism, which means each act is judged individually per the individuals affected. Okay, so we don't think about generally, is this a good thing to do? Does it promote happiness? That's what rule utilitarianism, Mill's theory, does. Actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. Instead, Jeremy Bentham's act utilitarianism, God, that's hard to say, that principle which approves or disapproves of every action whatsoever, according to the tendency which appears to have to augment or diminish the happiness of the party whose interest is in question. So when you're about to go do something, you have to consider, how is this going to affect those impacted, and try to create the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Mills, instead, you think ahead of time about what generally promotes happiness for most people, and you go with these general rules. So for Mill's rule utilitarianism, he gives the example is normally one shouldn't lie. Okay, why should one not lie? Well, these are his reasons. Lying is first often done for selfish momentary gains, like avoiding embarrassment, rather than what is truly beneficial. 2, lying undermines human trustworthiness in general. He now thinks, in general, is there ever a good time to lie? Or is that going to promote the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people? And he thinks, yeah, actually, lies by omission, meaning not saying information when asked or prompted, may actually create the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. One, a lie by omission doesn't undermine human trustworthiness as a lie of commission does. Lie by omission is when you just don't say something, but you have that opportunity or the right to say something at that time. Lie by commission is when you say unbidden lie, or when you lie positively, like you say something that is falsehood. Okay, so he doesn't think you should say a falsehood. You should just omit giving information that may be pertinent. For example, if it's under a life-threatening condition, quote, when the withholding of some fact as of information from a malefactor or of bad news from a person dangerously ill would save an individual from great and unmerited evil. So that's the exemption to the clause, normally don't lie. Okay, it's done for poor reasons and it destroys trust. Okay, instead only lie when it's going to save an individual from great and unmerited evil, and will just be the result of withholding a fact. Philosopher Cicely Box says this, but then lying is a way of gaining power over other people through manipulating them in various ways. And this is something that children learn. If we are to mature, we have to unlearn any enjoyment of that power. Is it ever morally permissible to lie to someone to manipulate them emotionally? Why or why not? Given Mill's standard, morally should one lie? 1, lying to your roommate to save face for yourself over a minor mistake. 2, lying to your professor about your work. 3, lying to a person who's gravely injured by not telling them of the death of their friend. Second big difference between Bentham and Mill is the idea of whether quality of pleasure matters, okay, or should all pleasures count equally? So Bentham uses this concept of Pushpin versus poetry. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Pushpin. I've got an image here. If you can't see it, it's of two people. And they're the idea is to push pins across the desk at somebody, and then if the pins fall down, then the other person gets to pick them up. Okay, and it's this game back and forth. It's basically a minor gambling game that they were doing in the, I guess, late 1700s, early 1800s. So basically what it is it's not a educational game. It's just like playing, I don't know, some minor card game, okay? And then he's going to compare that to intellectual pleasures, like the intellectual pleasure of poetry or philosophy, okay? He says, in his thought experiment, he's trying to compare lowbrow and highbrow pleasures. And he wants to argue that just as people should count equally morally, pleasures should count equally. Prejudice apart, he says, the game of pushpin is of equal value with the arts and sciences of music and poetry. If the game of pushpin furnished more pleasure, it is more valuable than either. So that's Bentham, and Mill gets a chance to respond. And this is the way that he responds. He gives a thought experiment, which we will call Socrates dissatisfied. Okay? So he says, look, the higher pleasures shouldn't count just as much as the lower pleasures. They should count for more. This is what he argues. No intelligent human being would consent to be a fool. No instructed person would be an ignoramus. No person of feeling and conscience would be selfish and base, even though they should be persuaded that the fool, the dunce, or the rascal is better satisfied with his lot than they are with theirs. Okay? To continue, I want you to think about this. He says, it's better to be a human dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. It's better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. And if the fool or the pig are of a different opinion, it's because they only know their own side of the question. The other party to the comparison knows both sides. So, do you agree or disagree with Mill, and why? Should the quality of the pleasure matter, or should all pleasures count equally? Now, strengths of utilitarianism, it's egalitarian, it's inclusive, it's democratic. It tries to epitomize the golden rule, to imagine everyone's happiness mattering. It offers one simple rule with a clear decision procedure. So you just go through, we can think of Bentham's calculus, just go through. How is it gonna impact, and how long is that impact gonna be, and is it gonna be mixed results, et cetera, et cetera. It offers foundations that focus on alleviating suffering and helping others. Historically, it offers a countervailing theory to natural rights, meaning that this is meant as sort of the next better idea for ethical theory. Jeremy Bentham argued famously, natural rights is simple nonsense, natural and imprescriptible rights, rhetorical nonsense, nonsense upon stilts. Now, objections to utilitarianism. First, we'll talk about the no rest objection. So this basically says, if we're supposed to be promoting the good or promoting the happiness for others, isn't this sort of a tireless a set of unending quests to take care of others, to save the planet, so to say. And if it is, then doesn't that really ask too much of a person? Now, some philosophers just argue, no, it's not asking for anybody to do everything for everybody. It's basically if something is in your impact zone, because most people are private and they don't have a huge impact zone. If something occurs in your impact zone, then you can think about its effects on others, but otherwise it's not a public concern. So you don't have to be running around saving the planet, according to, for example, Mill. On the other hand, some more contemporary philosophers like Peter Singer argue that one should be more concerned with others and spend more time not resting and trying to promote more good. Objections. So basically, you could either say it's not that big a problem, which is what Mill says for the no rest objection, or you can be like Singer and say, no, bite the bullet and say, no, people should be doing more than they're doing currently. Another objection to utilitarianism is it fails to account for the differences in moral duty between strangers and those close to us. At least it's sort of a general moral intuition that the preferences of parents, family members, loved ones, friends, colleagues, neighbors, etc., all have I'll say actually the way I said it, decreasing demands on us as they get farther estranged and farther from our inner moral circle. Utilitarianism, by being egalitarian, wants to treat everybody as morally equal, and this is a different idea. Utilitarianism ignores duties based on backward-looking considerations, focusing only on future-looking considerations. So it's not going, well, I can't promote the greatest happiness by taking all my friends on a snowboarding trip this weekend because I promised grandma I would mow her lawn and I've got to fulfill my duty because I made that promise and grandmas matter. Okay. In this case, the somebody who thinks promises matter because they were made in the past, okay, would think that this is an objection to utilitarianism because it's only looking at what's going to produce the happiness in the future. Predicting consequences of decisions is difficult, and doing it well is even more difficult. Utilitarianism also doesn't accord with moral rights and concepts of justice. Here, let me give you the transplant thought experiment, which is meant as an objection to utilitarianism. So do this with me, please. A brilliant transplant surgeon has 5 patients, each in need of a different organ, each of whom will die with that organ. Unfortunately, there are no organs available to perform any of these 5 transplant operations. A healthy young traveler just passing through the city the doctor works in comes in for a routine checkup. The doctor discovers that the traveler's organs are compatible with all 5 of his dying patients. And if the doctor were to disappear, and if the young man were to disappear, no one would suspect the doctor. Do you support the morality of the doctor to kill that tourist and provide his healthy organs to those 5 dying persons and save their lives? Now, the last thing I want to talk about is sort of the aspect that brings together both legal theory and political theory, which is sort of theory of law. And this is about the moral limits of law. So according to utilitarianism, they believe in what we call the harm principle. Law should not restrict an individual's activity if the act does not harm or risk damage to anyone else. The reasons that support this is first, interfering with people's autonomy is bad because autonomy is important and autonomy promotes happiness. I want you to think about it this way. Again, we're going to go back to the vanilla cake or chocolate cake. You know best as a person which one you like the most. And if you had the freedom to choose from either one, okay, so I send both chocolate cake and vanilla cake, so there's no problem with your choice. You get whichever one you would like the most. You would be the most happy, okay? And not just because you now have 2 slices of cake. So autonomy is really important. And law is by nature coercive. It exerts legal force in place of private force. Penalizing someone, for example, fines or jails, increases pain. It increases discomfort. It decreases pleasure and happiness. So less law, better, right? As long as the laws are focused on preventing harm and damage to others. Law asserts the right to exercise control against an individual's free will. Forcing people to act against their own free will decreases pleasure as well. So there must be an overriding reason, harm to others, to limit autonomy. And this is according to the harm principle. One way that we describe it is the right to swing your arm ends where your neighbor's nose begins. Okay? So you can swing your arm all you want. That's free will. But as soon as it's about to make contact with your neighbor's nose, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Bentham in particular focuses on how laws are often just simply forcing customary behavior of majority or dominant groups. So society should encourage individuality, originality, and self-development instead of just customary behavior, according to Bentham. People are different, and what is good for one is not necessarily good for another, and we shouldn't enforce that. As I brought up before, but I want to really emphasize, the person who knows best what his interests, preferences, expectations, desires, and will is the person concerned. So I know best my own, you know best your own, he knows best his own, etc., etc. As John Stuart Mill puts it on Liberty, on Liberty, the moral agent is the person most interested in his own well-being. The interest which any other person, except in cases of strong personal attachment, can have in it is trifling. Compare with that which he himself has. Active learning exercise, assess the utilitarian reasoning above supporting the harm principle. So give yourself some time and just think about that. In Bentham's unpublished papers, he gave one of the first extensive arguments in favor of gay rights and sexual liberty in British history. Until 1861, homosexuality could be punished by death in England. So Bentham argues first, sexual activity may be the most pleasurable activity available for humans. Thus, limiting sexual liberty is bad in general. Okay, again, I want to say he's born in 1750. What was it? 1750s, died in the early 1800s. Next, he said, look, gay sex is not unnatural. Whatever people choose is natural. He gives an extended argument sort of explaining how you can only use the word natural to mean what is occurring, that you can't change the meaning of natural to mean something that is not natural, and gay sex is occurring. It would not harm population, which is one of the main arguments that people were making socially at that time, any more than celibacy would. If you're gonna argue against gay rights, because you think that would harm population increase, then you would also have to argue against celibacy, according to Bentham. He argues that it has existed throughout history and across the world in many forms. And he gives many more reasons. So if you're interested, go ahead and check out online. There are text versions of it that are available now. Competing theories of laws. Okay, so the harm principle says basically you can't enact a law for any behavior other than stuff that either threatens to cause harm to others or causes harm to others. Legal paternalism, on the other hand, says, look, it's permissible to have laws that force people to act in a particular way when the person interfered with will be better off or protected from harm. So an example of these types of laws include motorcycle helmet and seatbelt laws. The offense principle says it is permissible to have laws as an effective way of preventing serious offense, as opposed to either injury, damage, or harm to persons other than the agent. So a law against cursing in public or public nudity would be an offense principle law. Finally, legal moralism. This advocates that laws should be allowed to prevent behavior if that behavior is against local collective moral customs. For example, anti-gambling bans. Blue laws are a type of legal moralism. They are laws based on religious custom that restrict activity on Sunday, simply because religious tradition said Sunday is a day of rest. For example, in some places, no liquor is sold on Sundays. So match the type of law to the type of legal theory. Laws preventing assault, laws preventing loud music at night, laws against the person using hard drugs, or laws against hunting on Sunday.